Namaste and welcome to Expulsion at 50, an oral history project created to commemorate the 50-year anniversary of the expulsion of Asians from Uganda back in 1972. One of the reasons cited for expelling the Asians was their visible and significant control of the economy, both in the retail sector and as industrialists. In this episode, I explore the question of what made the Indian businesses so successful. Back in December 2021, I had the honor of speaking to Jaffer Kapasi, whose footprint in business started with his father back in Uganda. I hope you find our conversation interesting and insightful.
My father was the fifth child of my grandfather, and they had a business in a place called Savarkundla in India, in state of Gujarat, Kathiawad. And the business was failing, and so my grandfather decided to send my father to Africa. He was only 14 years old. He landed in Mombasa in a dhow, actually, and you can see the journey they had to go through crossing the Indian Ocean. And he was received at the port, Mombasa port, by my grandfather's cousin. And this is how the story began. My father started to work in the stationery business of this Dungawala family. And he started to learn the language, the Swahili, and how to trade, how to deal with customers. And the journey begins. Just after a few months later, a cousin of my this Dungawala family from Kampala arrived in Mombasa, and he saw my father working in the business, and he said, "Can I have this boy for Kampala, because my business is expanding and I need someone there?" And Mr. Dungawala said, "Look, he's just come and he's still learning." I said, no, I really desperately need somebody in Kampala. So this is how he ended up in, and again, same Dungawala family, but they're cousins in Kampala. And later on, in the same business environment, he also was invited by another gentleman from Masindi, Mr. Rajab Ali Abdul Ali, to work for him in his business. And so this is how he migrated from Mombasa to Kampala to Masindi. And Masindi was a very small village, and the lifestyle was very much like a Gujarati village in India. Most of the people there were traders. And my father started to learn the language, Swahili, and he was living with his, in fact, this Dungawala family. They had a very large house. I remember him telling me that he was paid about £5 a year for, for all the work. And after about 6 months, he was encouraged to set up his own business, which was in a very small village called Bugungu. And by 1932, he was asked to set up his own business. A small village, again, on Lake Albert. There was no electricity, no hospitals, no schools. And the people carried goods on the bicycles and on the cycle track. They used to stop by the elephants. They would block this small track for hours and would not let them pass. And no electricity and no piped water. So you can see what struggle they have went through. And there were just a few Indian families there, mainly Gujaratis. And then he progressed well from there, and then he moved to a place called Butiaba, which again was on the shores of Lake Albert. Butiaba was flourishing because they had a ship called Robert Corrinden. The ship used to carry cotton between Congo and Uganda. My father really prospered there at such a fast speed. In his shop, he used to sell anything from, he had this hand pump, petrol pump. He used to sell fish nets to the fabric to make gomasi, the Africans, which Africans wore. And then he used to even sell Kit Kats. So So it was a mixture of all in the shop. You'll find anything really. There's only two shops in the town, and there's two Indian families. That's it. But many of his customers were whites, because the ship, this Robert Corrinder, which was built in Scotland, the ship's captain plus some of the top crew were all British, and they had their lavish lifestyle there. They used to have their own quarters there, and they used to buy everything and anything. And then in 1948-49, my father decided to go back to India, really to get married. He got married in Mumbai, and my mother comes from Mumbai, and she was born there. So again, she had to adjust to a very different lifestyle, to learn the language, to help my father in the business. And she again started learning how to trade as well. Now, the other good thing was, Butiaba is very near Murchison Falls. So people used to come there as tourists, also people from India, UK and Germany, America. So it was more or less a sort of tourist attraction place where it generated more business for my father. And the ship was the biggest employer because they employed hundreds of people to man the ship, to load it, to maintain it, and so on. So that was the real attraction. But I think Ernest Hemingway had traveled on this ship called Robert Corrinder. It's about 1,000-ton displacement capacity. And believe me, it had a theater on as well. They had the theater, they had cane furniture, a sort of a very lavish.
The SS Corindon was known as Uganda's greatest ferry, transporting goods and people across Lake Albert. More will be revealed later.
So you see, because Butiaba didn't have any hospital, so my mother had to bring me. So in fact, I was born in Masindi because there was no hospitals there. So my mother to come to the place where my father used to work. That's where she stayed because there was no proper hotels and so on. There was only one hotel called Masindi Hotel. My brother and I were becoming older. So I was 4 and my elder brother was 5. So my father said, look, we can't live much more in Butiaba, even though we are making a lot of money. We are so busy here making money, but we have to think of the education for our children. So he decided to move to Masindi, where they had hospitals, schools. So we came to Masindi, and the business in the beginning wasn't very good. He had to make inroads, and he had to struggle to get through. Started doing a hardware DIY business. He wanted a specialist hardware DIY business. There was a lot of demand there. The people were demanding building materials, cement, and things like that. So he set up a shop there, which was selling all this. In fact, he used to sell motorboat engines to Vespa scooters and and each and everything there.
Under colonial rule, the British had a policy of separate development, whereby community schools were established for the different races. Integration started once Uganda gained independence in 1962.
But anyway, in Masindi, I think things got better because we went to a school called Masindi Public School, which again was mainly a Gujarati-run school. All the majority of the teachers were Gujarati, and we spoke. In fact, everything was taught in Gujarati as the first language. And I remember Mr. Maganbhai and Mr. Bhatt and all those teachers who used to teach us the proper Indian way of life. Comes 1962, and things really changed when we were asked to make sure that English is the first language, not the Gujarati. And the second language would be Swahili, and the third language would be Gujarati. And in 1962, that's when we had the electricity. Before that, we were using lantern. Then onwards, we went to a school built by the Americans. It's called Kabalega High School, which was named after the king, the present king's grandfather. Quite a lot of teachers were either English or Canadians, and very few Indians. I remember seeing Dr. No, James Bond movie in Masindi. That was the first movie I think I remember I saw. So they introduced a lot of English way of life to other headmaster. One day, summoned me to his home and said, "Look, I want to teach you how to eat with fork and knife."
So by the time you were in high school, your father was really established in business with a hardware store in Masindi and other shops in Butiaba. And I wonder, Jaffer, were you also expected to work in the shop?
But the other thing which my father did was excellent. Was he wanted to make sure that we also follow in his footsteps in terms of running a shop. So we used to go early in the morning to the school about 8 o'clock. We'd come home by 3. At 4 o'clock, we had to be in the shop. It was compulsory for us to be in the shop between 4 and 5. I think I learned that what my father was doing in the business and how he was making money, and also learned about the trade, the hardware trade, because he used to, for example, make us say if somebody wanted a 6-inch nails, then he would make sure that I weigh on the scale, and then I collect the right change from the customer, and also I treat the customer well, with discipline, with good humor, and make sure that he comes back again. And also, you see, the other thing was because my father spoke very little English, despite that he ran a very successful business. He learned quite a few good English words from us because we were educated in English by the English teachers and others. And he used to make us read Uganda Argus, the national daily. One day when I saw a big advertisement in Uganda Argus that East African Railways are selling this ship, in which we saw it in Butiaba, Robert Corrinden, on a tender basis. So in fact, we bid for it in the East African Railways. And in fact, he won the tender.
Wow, that's quite something. So what was he planning to do with the ship?
So my father had an idea of converting that ship into a floating hotel. And the reason for the floating hotel was to see surrounded by animals, elephants, you could see giraffes, you could see zebras, all that. And the ship already had the facility, for example, the proper hotel facility, they had cane furniture, the rooms were very well designed for a hotel. And he had to spend just a few, maybe a few $1,000 maybe, or whatever you want to call it, just to make it into upgraded a floating hotel.
Your father was really enterprising and wow, quite a risk taker as well.
Yes, he was, despite the fact that he was only learned 4 classes of Gujarati in Gujarat. He had a lot of entrepreneur skills.
So where do you think that spirit of enterprise and that determination, comes from?
I think, as you know, see, if you look at in India as well, the majority of the entrepreneurs or wheelers and dealers, as we call it here, are Gujaratis. But we are known as traders, like the Parsi community has been in Mumbai. So we have got this ingrained thing about the Bohra, the word Bohra means trader, the Dawoodi Bohras, we are Dawoodi Bohras. So in fact, if you come across many Dawoodi Bohras, you'll find that they're either small traders or retailers or wholesalers, and some are in fact put into manufacturing.
So one could say East Africa was kind of virgin territory for Gujaratis to set up their different businesses.
Local people, they didn't have this acumen. Even today, when I've been to Uganda so many times, and I talk to our African friends who I work with, I was like, you need to acquire this. I know Uganda is such a rich country, but you have to acquire this trading, or you got to be a business acumen, to do what we used to do, or my forefathers used to do it in Uganda, which I see there's still a big gap. comes August 1972, he announced the expulsion. He said that he had a dream as his Tororo barracks, and he had been asked by his whoever, by his Allah, whoever, to expel all the Asians from the community, from Uganda. And when we heard this in Masindi on the radio, we thought this simply as a joke. And my father said, this country cannot survive without the Asians or the Indians, because we control over 90% of the economy: retail, wholesale, manufacturing. Even if you look at the professions, there's doctors, lawyers, engineers, technicians, all majority of them Asians.
Post-independence, as part of the Africanization policy, the rules and regulations for having a business in Uganda kept changing. In many instances, non-citizens were required to apply for trading licenses.
So my father was a loyalist in that way, that he didn't want to. He wanted to become a citizen of Uganda. So when it was announced that please do apply, he applied in time for Ugandan nationality. In fact, we chased and chased. We hired an agent, chased the home office of Uganda to see if we could acquire the Ugandan citizenship, which was never processed. Trying to run our businesses there, and we knew we had pressure to change to Ugandan citizen, but nothing happened, nothing changed, and we just kept on trading and kept on chasing, and we kept on getting new rules about who we can employ, who can run the businesses, and people had to apply for annual licenses. I'm saying Masindi, we had to apply for annual license to keep on trading. Injustice we suffered when we were there, despite the fact that majority of the people were loyalists, and they wanted to stay there. And in Uganda was their home, their children were born there, and they didn't know any other way of life. And none of them wanted to go back and settle, restart in India, where things are the villages where they left, there are things that would have moved on, and there was no way that could start in India.
As the deadline approached, most businesses had little choice of what to do with their assets.
The problem we had was, as you mentioned, there's a lot of stock in the business, and unfortunately, we got pictures of that as well. And the major problem we had was how to sell this to people who haven't got that kind of money to buy the goods. But the cars, there's no way you could sell the car because people didn't have the money to buy they have the money to buy the cars. And there were so many also being available because everybody was leaving. Those people who had the wealth, it was living. So there was a lot of goods and commodities and everything available to give or to just leave it. In fact, on TV, I think we only had 2 TV sets in the town in Masindi in those days. And what do we do with it? So there was a lot of losses which our people suffered. In fact, if you look at the other aspects, insurance policies or whatever we had, it was of no value.
How did your staff react to the fact that you are now closing up and leaving the country?
Yes, I think a few genuinely cried, because they said, look, we haven't got a job now. So what do we do? Okay, you've given us quite a bit of gifts, but how long will it last? So some of them were genuinely crying and they didn't want us to go. But he said, look, what can we do? There's nothing we can do to stop the government, forcing you to leave the country. What they're saying, please come back, once, things are better for you. They say, we pray for you. And those sort of very kind sentiments.
How was it for your parents, after all the hard work and now just to walk away from it all?
I think it's a real trauma and real suffering in their hearts of leaving a country which they thought it was their home.
After a short stay in the refugee camps, Jaffer Bai's family moved to Leicester. where they started a new life. He went on to study at university and qualified as an accountant.
The thing is that we lived as a minority in Uganda, and so we had already, our brain was already trained to accept minority status in England. I set up my own practice from home in 1986. And then within 6 months, touchwood, I progressed so fast that I had to set up a proper office. And then I soon realized that the Asians were trading amongst themselves rather than with the mainstream. So I approached a number of people on Belgrave Road, Sari Mandir and others, and said, yeah, I think we need to set up our own Asian Chamber of Commerce. And so we got together and set up a proper, working chamber and started inviting the mainstream businesses to work with us, see if we could get orders from them to expand our businesses, whatever. But see, by 1986, quite a lot of businesses, or the people from, particularly from East Africa, set up businesses on Belgrave Road and Melton Road. In fact, City Council had earmarked this road for demolition, but soon the Asians came in, started developing businesses from the beginning. Family set up, with wives and children helping in the business, long hours, working on Saturdays and Sundays, and then soon, we started the meetings with Leicester Chamber of Commerce. It took us 2 years to negotiate a deal with them so that we could be on their board and they could be on our board. And this actually resulted in me getting an OBE, Order of the British Empire, for encouraging the Asian businesses to trade with the mainstream businesses. And you can see that Leicester has really prospered. Even today, you find there's so many businesses, anything from food sector to manufacturing to you name it, the Asians are there, and they're very flourishing businesses.
20 years later, Jaffer finds himself in Uganda again.
It comes 1992, and I was asked by a journalist named Graham Dedman to come with, in fact, to go with him to Uganda to see what had happened to our assets. So we flew from here to Entebbe and on to Kampala. And then we went to Masindi as well. We saw that the property which we left in 1972, it had the same paintwork. Everything was exactly the same, except that the few doors and the windows were missing. I went to my school, same thing again. The windows, and I have pictures of that, and Uganda was in such a poor state. It comes 1994, because I was enrolled in Chamber of Commerce, we decided to lead a trade mission. In fact, I led the trade mission to Kampala to promote trade, and we had about 12, 13 businesses who joined me, quite a few of them originally of Uganda. And we found that there's a lot of trading opportunities there, and the corruption was at zero level at that time. Uganda needed anything. In fact, the locals were asking us to buy second-hand goods and from England because the China was already there and trying to compete in terms of prices and so on. So they said, okay, we'll buy your fridges were second-hand, your cookers was the second-hand electric cookers and so on. But so and quite a few of people actually got orders, to supply them by Uganda, particularly the pharmacies. There's a lot of opportunities there. And then comes 1990. In fact, we met President Museveni, who made time for us, and he was very supportive. Comes 1996, I led another trade mission too. This went to all the countries: Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. And again, a lot of trading opportunities were explored, and many of the businesses benefited by getting orders and so on.
Over the past 40 years or so, a few thousand Indians have returned and established businesses back in Uganda. President Museveni appointed Jaffer to be the Consul General at the Ugandan High Commission in the UK, a role he continues to this day. I am Donna Vasani, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Till next time, keep well and stay safe.